With one final push, the forces of nature collided with the old ones, throwing them back with a deafening roar. The ground shook, and the storm above seemed to dissipate as the last remnants of the old one's power flickered and faded. Isabella stood, her chest heaving with exhaustion, her body trembling from the effort. The elements around her slowly calmed, the fire dying down, the wind settling, and the water falling back to its natural state. The earth beneath her feet rumbled once more, but this time it was a peaceful tremor, a sign that the balance had been restored. Zane moved quickly to her side, his expression filled with concern. "Izzy, you did it. You really did it." Isabella nodded, her voice hoarse, but filled with quiet pride. "We did it. Together." The air around them was still now, the threat of the old ones vanquished, for the moment. The world had been saved, but Isabella knew that the battle was far from over. The old ones would return, of that she was certain. But this time, she would be ready. And with the child inside her, the balance itself, she would protect the world. No matter what came next. Chapter 42, The Quiet Before the Storm. The world seemed to stand still in the aftermath of the battle. The storm clouds that had once raged above them had dispersed, and the air felt different now, heavier, as though the earth itself was holding its breath. The once violent winds had calmed, leaving only the faint rustle of leaves in the distance. The earth beneath Isabella's feet, cracked and scarred by the fierce elemental struggle, now felt still, as though the land itself was waiting. Isabella stood in the center of the battlefield, her body exhausted from the strain of wielding the elements with such raw power. The child inside her was quiet for now, its energy no longer surging but still present, like a steady pulse beneath her skin. She could feel it, a bond deeper than anything she had ever known. The child was both a part of her and something more, a force tied to the balance of the world. Zane stood close beside her, his expression filled with both awe and concern. He was watching her closely, as though waiting for her to collapse, though he said nothing. They had faced the old ones together, fought side by side, but now, in the stillness that had followed the battle, it was as though the weight of everything was finally sinking in. "You okay?" Zane asked quietly, his voice laced with both tenderness and a trace of worry. Isabella turned to him, giving him a faint smile. "Yeah," she said, her voice hoarse, the words coming out in a whisper. "I think I'm just trying to catch my breath." Zane nodded, though his eyes were full of something deeper. That was incredible, Izzy. We faced them. We beat them. But I can see it in your eyes. You're not done yet." Isabella closed her eyes for a moment, letting the quietness of the world wash over her. There was truth in his words. The old ones had been pushed back, but they were not gone. They had been defeated for now, but their hunger for control, for power, would not rest. She could feel their presence lingering, like a shadow that hadn't fully retreated. And more than that, there was the child, the force that tied everything together, the key to everything. "I'm not done," she said softly, her voice steadying as the determination inside her grew. "We're not done. The old ones will return. And next time, they'll be stronger." Zane stepped closer, his hand gently resting on her arm. "We'll be ready. You're not alone in this, Izzy. Whatever comes, we face it together." She nodded, drawing strength from his words, from his unwavering presence. "Together," she echoed. The silence around them stretched, thick and heavy, as though the earth was waiting for something. The air was still, but it felt like a storm was gathering on the horizon, a storm that was not of nature, but of fate. Isabella could feel it deep inside her, the world was shifting, and the balance she had fought to protect was still fragile. She closed her eyes again, focusing inward. The child, the power, the elements, everything was intertwined, like threads in a tapestry that she had just begun to understand. But there was still something missing, something she hadn't fully grasped. What was the child's true purpose? Was it meant to restore the world, or was it a force that could destroy it if not guided correctly? She felt the power swirling inside her again, the elemental forces that had become a part of her, and the child's steady pulse in time with her heartbeat. The bond between them had deepened, but it was also a responsibility, one that she could not bear alone. As if in response to her thoughts, the wind shifted slightly, a subtle change, a whisper that seemed to carry with it an answer. It was faint, but Isabella could sense the shift. It was time to move forward. The child's power was a key, but it was still untapped. She had to guide it. And to do that, she had to understand it fully. The path ahead wasn't clear, but she couldn't wait forever. The world wouldn't wait. "We need to find the temple of the child," Isabella said suddenly, her voice filled with quiet certainty. Zane looked at her, his brow furrowing in confusion. "The temple of the child? What's that?" Isabella looked up at the sky, her gaze distant, her thoughts focused on the whisper of the elements around her. "There's a place, a temple where the power of the child can be fully realized. I don't know where it is exactly, but I feel it. I've heard stories. It's where the balance can be restored, where the true purpose of the child can be unlocked." Zane nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving her. "Then we find it. Whatever it takes." Isabella smiled faintly, appreciating his unwavering support. But deep inside, a flicker of fear remained. What if they couldn't find it? What if they weren't ready? And what if the child's power was too much for them to control? As if sensing her unease, Zane stepped closer, taking her hand in his grip firm and reassuring. "We will find it," he said softly. "And when we do, we'll face whatever comes next. Together." Isabella's heart swelled at the strength in his voice, at the certainty that he would never leave her, no matter what dangers lay ahead. She wasn't alone in this fight. They were in this together, as they had always been. The wind picked up again, swirling around them, the energy of the earth, the fire, the water, and the air all coming alive in a response to her unspoken plea. The world was ready for change. And so was she. Together, Isabella whispered. "We'll find the temple of the child. And we'll restore the balance." With that promise, they began walking forward, the path uncertain but filled with purpose. The journey ahead was not going to be easy, but they had faced the darkness before. And they would face it again. The storm that had threatened the world had not passed. It was only gathering strength, preparing for the final clash. But now, Isabella was no longer just a girl running from her destiny. She was the guardian of the balance, and with Zane by her side, she would protect the future. No matter what it took. Chapter 43, The Temple of the Child. The journey ahead was filled with uncertainty, but Isabella and Zane moved forward with quiet determination. The world around them had changed since their last battle with the old ones. The air felt heavier, charged with the anticipation of something greater to come. Each step they took seemed to echo through the earth itself, and Isabella could feel the elements swirling around her, waiting for the next command. But this wasn't just a journey to find the temple of the child, it was a quest for understanding her own power, the child inside her, and the role they would play in the world's future. The map was only a fragment of the puzzle. The temple was said to be hidden in a place that no one had been able to find for centuries, a place where the balance of the elements was pure, where the child's power could be fully realized. But the more Isabella thought about it, the more she understood that this wasn't just about finding a physical place. It was about uncovering the truth behind the child's purpose. Could she truly guide it? Could she unlock its full potential? Or would it be too much to control? Zane walked beside her, his gaze ever watchful, his presence a steadying force that kept the rising doubts in her chest at bay. The more they traveled, the more Isabella realized how much she had come to rely on him, not just for protection, but for strength and clarity. He was her anchor, the one person she trusted above all else. And in this uncertain world, that was everything. As they moved deeper into the heart of the land, the scenery began to change. The forests grew denser, the trees towering above them like ancient guardians. The air was thick with the scent of moss and earth, the silence punctuated only by the occasional rustle of leaves. Every step they took seemed to bring them closer to something greater, a power that Isabella could feel growing stronger by the minute. It was the child, she knew. Its energy was pulling them toward their destination, guiding them like a beacon in the night. They reached a clearing, the trees parting to reveal a vast expanse of wild, untamed land. In the center of the clearing stood a single, towering structure, a massive stone archway, its surfaces covered in intricate runes and symbols. The stone was ancient, weathered by time, but still standing strong, as though it had withstood centuries of change. There was no mistaking it. This was the Temple of the Child. Isabella's heart raced as she approached the archway. The energy in the air was different now. Charged with the power of the earth, the elements, and the child's presence. The air itself seemed to shimmer with potential, and Isabella could feel the child's heartbeat matching her own, a rhythm that echoed through her veins. This was the place. The final step in their journey. Zane stepped beside her, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword, his eyes scanning the surroundings for any sign of danger. He could feel it too. The power in the air was palpable, and he knew that they were walking into the unknown. But there was no turning back now. "This is it," Isabella said quietly, her voice filled with awe. "The Temple of the Child." Zane nodded, his gaze lingering on the towering archway. "It's like nothing I've ever seen before. Are you ready for this?" Isabella hesitated for a moment, her hand on the cold stone of the archway. The weight of everything they had been through, the battles, the trials, the old ones, crashed over her in that moment. But the child inside her stirred, its energy pulsing in time with her heartbeat. The decision had already been made. She had come this far, and there was no turning back. "I don't know if I'm ready," Isabella admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I have to be. For the child. For the world." Zane's gaze softened as he looked at her, his expression filled with quiet understanding. "You don't have to do it alone. Whatever happens in there, we face it together." With his words echoing in her mind, Isabella stepped forward, her hand brushing against the stone arch. The moment her fingers made contact with the ancient surface, a surge of energy shot through her, a force so powerful that it left her breathless. The ground beneath her feet trembled, and the symbols on the stone began to glow, the runes shimmering with an otherworldly light. For a moment, she felt the child inside her, its energy growing stronger, its presence filling her every sense. It was as though the temple itself was alive, responding to her, testing her, ready to unlock the power that had been hidden for so long. The archway before them slowly began to part, the stone shifting and cracking as though it had been waiting for this moment. Beyond it, the temple loomed, a massive structure, ancient and shrouded in mystery, with towering columns and a vaulted ceiling that seemed to reach the heavens. Isabella stepped through the archway, the energy around her growing more intense. Zane followed closely behind her, his eyes scanning their surroundings as they moved deeper into the temple. The air was thick with power, and every step they took seemed to reverberate with the weight of history. They walked in silence for a few moments, their footsteps echoing through the vast chambers. The walls were lined with ancient carvings, depictions of the elements, of the child's birth, of the balance between creation and destruction. The images seemed to shift and move, as though they were alive, telling a story that Isabella couldn't quite understand yet. They reached the heart of the temple, where a massive stone altar stood, bathed in an ethereal light. Atop the altar lay a large, glowing crystal, its surface pulsing with an otherworldly energy. The crystal was shaped like an egg, and it seemed to resonate with the power of the child within her, as though it was calling to her. Isabella felt a shiver run down her spine as she stepped closer to the altar. The crystal seemed to hum with energy, and she could feel the child stirring inside her, as though it recognized the power before her. "This is it," Isabella whispered, her voice filled with awe and fear. "The heart of the temple. The place where the child's power can be fully realized." Zane stepped beside her, his eyes wide with understanding. "What do we do now?" Isabella reached out slowly, her hand trembling as she touched the crystal. The moment her fingers made contact with it, a surge of energy shot through her, more powerful than anything she had ever felt before. The crystal seemed to pulse with life, and the room around them filled with a blinding light. The world around her began to blur, and for a moment, Isabella felt herself floating, her body weightless, her mind adrift in the vast ocean of energy. She could feel the child, its presence now more powerful than ever, filling her with a sense of connection to everything, the earth, the fire, the wind, the water. The balance. And then, in a flash of understanding, she knew. The child wasn't just a force of creation or destruction. It was the key to restoring the balance, to bringing the world back to harmony. But the choice was hers. She could guide the child, help it find its place in the world, or she could let it fall into darkness and chaos. The future of everything rested on her shoulders. The light around her began to fade, and she found herself back in the temple, standing before the altar, her hand still resting on the crystal. The power inside her surged one last time, and she knew what she had to do. She had to guide the child. The balance was hers to protect, and she would not let it fall. With a deep breath, she turned to Zane, her voice filled with quiet determination. It's time. Together, they would face whatever came next. Together, they would protect the balance. Chapter 44, The Choice of the Child. The light in the temple had dimmed, leaving a quiet glow that seemed to radiate from the crystal atop the altar. Isabella stood frozen for a moment, her hand still resting on its smooth surface, the energy swirling within her. The child inside her pulsed with power, its presence both a gift and a burden. The temple had revealed its truth, the child was the key to restoring the balance, but the path forward was unclear. The child could either heal the world or shatter it completely, depending on the choice Isabella made now. Zane stood a few paces behind her, his eyes watching her with a mix of concern and support. He had been by her side through every trial, every battle. But this decision, was hers alone. The power in her veins, the bond with the child, everything she had been through had led her here, to this moment of truth. Isabella could feel the crystals hum beneath her fingers, its pulse resonating with the rhythm of her own heartbeat. The air was thick with the energy of the temple, and in the silence, she could almost hear the whispers of the ancient ones who had built this place, the echoes of their knowledge and wisdom. It was as if the very walls of the temple were waiting for her to decide, to unlock the full potential of the child, or to leave it sealed away, its power untapped. She took a deep breath, focusing on the energy swirling within her. The child's power was alive. It felt like fire, like earth, like water and wind all at once, a force that could heal or destroy. The choice was both daunting and clear. She could choose to guide the child, to help it grow into its full potential, restoring balance to the world. Or, she could choose to shield it, to keep it hidden, to prevent it from ever being used by the wrong hands, like the old ones. The weight of the world seemed to press down on her shoulders, and for a brief moment, Isabella questioned everything. Was she strong enough to control the child's power? Could she guide it toward healing, or would it slip out of her hands, a force too great to manage? And yet, in the back of her mind, she heard the soft murmur of the elements, the pulse of the earth beneath her, the wind in the trees outside the temple. The child was part of the balance, it was not meant to be controlled, but to be guided, understood. She could feel it now. The elements were waiting for her to make her choice. Turning to face Zane, she could see the quiet support in his eyes, the trust he had in her. He had always believed in her, no matter what. He was her anchor, the one person who had stood by her through everything. With a soft smile, she reached for his hand, drawing strength from his presence. "I've made my choice," she said quietly, her voice filled with a quiet resolve. "I will guide the child. The balance depends on it." Zane's expression softened, and he squeezed her hand gently. "You're not alone in this. We'll face whatever comes together." Isabella nodded, turning back to the crystal. Her heart beat in time with the child's, and as she stepped closer to the altar, she felt the energy grow even more intense, like the world was holding its breath. The crystal began to glow brighter, its light becoming blinding, until the entire temple was bathed in a radiant brilliance. And then, just as suddenly, the light died down, and the energy settled. The crystal was no longer glowing, but the air still hummed with power. The world had shifted. The child had chosen its path, and so had she. She felt the child's power inside her, calm but vast, steady now. It was still a part of her, but now it was something more. The connection between them had deepened, like a river flowing through her veins, its course clear. The balance had been restored, but there was still work to be done. The child was ready now, its power unlocked, but its destiny, its true purpose, would unfold in time. The sound of footsteps broke her thoughts. Zane moved toward her, his eyes filled with pride and quiet awe. "You did it. You did it, Izzy." Isabella smiled at him, but the weight of what was to come hung heavily in the air. The old ones may have been defeated, but they were not gone. They would return. And when they did, she would be ready. The child had its place in the world now, but the true test was just beginning. "I've unlocked the child's power," Isabella said, her voice steady but filled with quiet determination. "But we both know this isn't over. The world still needs us. I still need to understand what the child's true role is in all of this." Zane nodded, his hand resting on her shoulder. "We'll find out. Together. We always have." Isabella looked at the crystal one last time, the soft hum still vibrating in the air. The temple had done its part, it had shown her the way, unlocked the power within the child. But now, she had to walk that path, step by step. The world outside the temple was vast, filled with danger and uncertainty, but Isabella was no longer the same person who had first stepped into this journey. She had found her strength, her purpose. And with Zane by her side, she knew they could face whatever came next. She turned away from the altar and walked toward the entrance, the child's energy a steady presence within her. The wind outside had picked up, but it was no longer a threat. It was a companion, an ally. The elements would be her guide. "We need to go," Isabella said softly, the weight of her words lingering in the air. "The child's power has been unlocked, but there is still much to do. The old ones will return, and we will face them. Together." Zane smiled and fell into step beside her. "Together," he agreed. As they stepped out of the temple, the sunlight broke through the clouds, casting a warm golden light over the landscape. The world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would come next. The journey was far from over, but Isabella felt ready. She had faced her fears, unlocked the power within her, and embraced her role as the guardian of the balance. And whatever came next, she would be ready to face it. Chapter 45, The Shifting Winds. The journey from the Temple of the Child was quiet, almost reverent, as Isabella and Zane made their way through the lush, untamed wilderness. The sun had broken through the lingering clouds, casting a golden light over the earth, but the air still held a quiet tension. The child's power inside Isabella pulsed steadily, a constant presence, like a heartbeat of the world itself. The landscape around them was breathtaking, towering trees, wildflowers swaying in the breeze, and the sounds of animals and birds that felt like a forgotten symphony. For a moment, Isabella allowed herself to breathe deeply, to appreciate the beauty of the world she was fighting to protect. But the calm was only temporary. She could still feel the darkness of the old ones lingering in her mind, a presence that would never truly leave her. They had been defeated, temporarily. But their hunger for power, for control over the child, had not been satisfied. They would come again. And when they did, Isabella knew the stakes would be higher than ever before. Zane's voice broke her thoughts. "We've come a long way since we first started this journey, haven't we?" Isabella turned to him, a soft smile tugging at her lips. "It feels like a lifetime ago, doesn't it? I barely recognize the person I was before. But I'm glad it was you by my side through all of it." Zane smiled back, his eyes full of that quiet, unshakable strength that had always grounded her. "And I'm glad I was there. We've faced everything together, and we'll keep facing it. No matter what comes next." Isabella nodded, squeezing his hand in hers. The bond they shared had grown stronger with every challenge, every battle. There was no doubt in her mind that they were meant to fight this fight side by side. But even now, with the power of the child fully realized, she knew the hardest part was still to come. As they moved deeper into the wilderness, the feeling of something approaching grew stronger. It was subtle at first, a whisper on the wind, the slightest tremor in the ground beneath their feet. But Isabella could feel it, the child stirring within her, responding to the shift in the air. Something was coming. Zane seemed to sense it too. His hand instinctively tightened around hers. What is it? Can you feel that? Isabella stopped in her tracks, closing her eyes for a moment to center herself. The air was heavy, charged with an unfamiliar energy. It wasn't the same as the presence of the old ones. This was something else, a disturbance in the balance, something that felt off. It's not the old ones, she said softly, her voice filled with uncertainty. But it's something. I can feel it in the child, in the earth. There's something wrong. A low, distant rumble echoed through the forest, and the ground beneath their feet trembled slightly. The trees swayed as though the wind had shifted, but there was no breeze. Isabella's heart skipped a beat. We need to find shelter, Zane said, his voice tense. Something's coming. And we don't know what it is. Isabella nodded, her pulse quickening. The feeling was growing stronger, more insistent. Whatever this new force was, it wasn't something they could ignore. As they began to move faster, the world around them seemed to grow darker. The sky, once clear and bright, now seemed overcast, clouds swirling as if in a storm that had not yet broken. The wind kicked up again, stronger this time, but there was no rain, no sign of a thunderstorm. Just the oppressive weight of something that was about to reveal itself. They reached a small, rocky outcrop nestled within the trees. Zane immediately took a defensive stance, his sword drawn, his eyes scanning the surroundings. Isabella stood still for a moment, trying to center herself, trying to understand what was happening. The child was growing more restless, its energy fluctuating, responding to the change in the air. But what was it? What was coming? Suddenly, the ground beneath them cracked open with a violent tremor, the earth splitting like an angry wound. From the chasm that opened in the earth, a dark figure emerged, a shadowy, formless presence, its edges flickering and shifting like smoke. Isabella's heart raced as the figure took form, its shape now becoming clearer. It was tall, cloaked in darkness, its face obscured by a hood, its presence heavy with power. The figure moved forward with unnatural speed, its dark energy swirling around it like a storm cloud. It was not an old one, not one of the beings they had fought before, but it was something else entirely. The child inside Isabella stirred again, its energy surging with an unfamiliar urgency. Isabella could feel the power rising, but it was different this time. This was not a power she could control with the elements. This was something other. Zane stepped in front of her, his sword raised. Who are you? He demanded, his voice firm, but filled with caution. What do you want? The figure's voice, when it came, was low, like the whisper of 1,000 lost souls. I am neither the old ones nor the child's keeper, it said, its voice echoing in the air. I am the force that balances both. The one who comes when the world teeters on the edge. Isabella felt a chill creep up her spine as she stepped forward, her eyes narrowing. You're not an old one, she said, her voice laced with suspicion. But what do you want with us? The figure tilted its head slightly, as if considering her words. I want nothing from you, child. I seek only to restore balance. To ensure the future you and your child will shape is the one destined to come. For there is more to the balance than you understand. Isabella's breath hitched. More, she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. What do you mean? We're just trying to protect it. To protect the child's future. The figure stepped closer, its presence overwhelming. The child is a force that cannot be controlled by one alone. It is part of the earth, part of the fire, the wind, and the water. But it is also something else. Something that has yet to be fully revealed. Zane's grip on his sword tightened. What are you saying? That we don't have control over the child? The figure's face, if it could be called a face, was shrouded in shadow, but its eyes glowed faintly with a strange, unsettling light. You do not yet understand the full scope of the power you have unleashed, nor the consequences it will bring. Your child is the key to the world's future, but it is also the key to its destruction. You must choose, child of balance. Will you shape the world, or will you tear it apart? Isabella's heart thundered in her chest. The force before her was neither ally nor enemy, but something entirely different, an agent of balance itself. And it was right. The child had the power to restore or destroy. It was a force too great for any one person to wield without consequence. The winds around them swirled again, and the figure's form flickered. The choice is yours, it said, its voice softer now, almost a whisper. But know this, the balance you protect is fragile. And in the end, you and the child will decide which way it falls. As suddenly as it had appeared, the figure dissolved into the air, the dark energy dissipating like smoke in the wind. The ground rumbled beneath their feet, and the sky seemed to clear again, but the tension in the air remained. Zane turned to Isabella, his eyes filled with questions. What just happened? Who was that? Isabella stood frozen, her thoughts racing. The figure had spoken the truth. The balance was fragile. And now, more than ever, she had to be careful with the child's power. The force inside her was both a gift and a curse, one that could either restore the world or break it. But the future was hers to shape. It always had been. I don't know, she said finally, her voice steady but filled with uncertainty. But we have a choice to make, Zane. And it's time we decided which way the balance will go. The wind whispered around them, and Isabella could feel it, a pull, a direction they needed to follow. The path forward was unclear, but she knew this was only the beginning of the true test. The world was waiting for its next move. And Isabella was ready to face it. Chapter 46, The Choice Before Them. The air was still, but the weight of the figure's cryptic words hung heavily in the space between Isabella and Zane. The child stirred restlessly within her, its energy pulsing with something new, something deeper than before. Isabella could feel the power within her like a storm held in a delicate bottle, fragile, but potent. The figure had warned her that the balance was fragile. She understood that now, more than ever. Do you think that was a warning or a threat? Zane's voice was low, and he stood close, his posture tense, his eyes scanning their surroundings as though expecting something to leap from the shadows. Isabella's gaze was fixed on the spot where the figure had dissolved into the air. The wind had calmed, but the unease in her chest remained. I don't know. Both, I think. Zane's eyes met hers, his expression dark but determined. We've always known the stakes were high, Izzy. But now, it feels like there's more we don't understand. Isabella took a deep breath, looking at the horizon, the vast expanse of wilderness that stretched ahead. She could feel the child's power growing stronger with every passing moment. The forces of nature, the earth beneath her feet, the fire in the distant mountains, the water flowing nearby, the air all around, were becoming part of her in ways that she had never imagined. But the choice was still hers. She had to make it. I know we have to move forward, Isabella said, her voice barely above a whisper. We can't stand here forever. Zane stepped closer to her, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. Whatever happens next, we face it together. We'll figure this out. We'll find the answers. Isabella looked at him, her heart swelling with gratitude for his support. There was no one else she trusted more than Zane. But she knew that the burden of what was to come, the decisions they would have to make, would weigh on her, and on them, in ways they couldn't yet foresee. They walked in silence for a while, the forest surrounding them peaceful but heavy with the feeling of impending change. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across their path, but there was something about the light, the way it seemed to shimmer oddly, that made the land feel alive, but not in a peaceful way. It was as if the earth itself was waiting for something, or someone, to arrive. After a while, they came to the edge of a vast canyon. The drop below was dizzying, the dark expanse of rock and distant rivers creating a daunting sight. A stone bridge arched over the canyon, old but sturdy, and beyond it was a massive, craggy mountain range that seemed to loom ominously on the horizon. Isabella could feel it, the direction the elements were pulling her toward. the child's power was guiding her. And the child was guiding her to that mountain. "This is it," Isabella whispered, her gaze fixed on the distant peaks. "We have to cross. The temple is in those mountains." Zane nodded, his grip tightening on the hilt of his sword. "Lead the way." They crossed the stone bridge, the wind picking up as they drew closer to the mountains. The air grew colder, the pressure in the air building. The power within Isabella swelled again, responding to the change, and she could feel the child within her, its energy both a comfort and a source of anxiety. It was growing stronger, the potential within it vast and untapped. She had to guide it. She had to be ready. The climb was grueling, the mountains rising steeply before them. As they ascended, Isabella could feel the weight of what was coming, an awareness deep in her bones that something momentous awaited them at the top of the mountain. The temple was close. And so, too, were the answers. The path grew narrow, the rocks beneath their feet slippery with frost, but they pressed on, pushing through the cold, through the biting winds. The atmosphere around them was charged, as though the mountain itself was alive, waiting. The child inside her pulsed steadily, responding to the energy that radiated from the peak. Finally, after hours of climbing, they reached the summit. Before them stood the entrance to a vast cave, its mouth dark and foreboding. Carvings of ancient symbols lined the walls around the entrance, and there was a quiet hum in the air, as though the very rock was vibrating with energy. Isabella hesitated for a moment, her heart racing. She knew this was the place. The temple of the child was hidden within this mountain, and what they would find inside would determine everything. "We're here," she said, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and uncertainty. Zane stood beside her, his eyes scanning the cave entrance. "Ready?" Isabella nodded, her hand tightening around the stone pendant that hung around her neck, a reminder of everything she had fought for, and everything she had to protect. "Let's go." They stepped into the cave, the air inside colder than outside, and the walls narrower, closing in on them as they moved deeper. The cave was long and winding, the stone slick beneath their boots, the faint sound of distant water echoing through the narrow passages. Isabella could feel the energy growing stronger, almost pulsing, as if the very walls of the cave were alive, responding to her presence. They walked for what felt like hours, the silence pressing in around them, until they reached a vast chamber. The ceiling was high, the walls covered in more ancient carvings, glowing faintly with a bluish light. In the center of the chamber stood a massive stone platform, surrounded by 4 towering statues that seemed to be watching over it. At the center of the platform was a small, raised pedestal, and on top of it lay a glowing crystal, a crystal that pulsed with the same energy Isabella had felt within herself. The child's power. Isabella stepped forward, drawn to it like a magnet, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the power in the air, a vast, untapped potential waiting to be unlocked. This was it. This was where it would all come to a head. Zane moved beside her, his eyes filled with awe as he took in the chamber. "Is this it? The heart of the temple?" Isabella nodded, her breath catching as she approached the pedestal. "It's the source of the balance. It's where the child's power will either be unlocked, or destroyed." She reached out, her fingers brushing the surface of the crystal. The moment her skin made contact, a surge of energy shot through her, like lightning racing through her veins. The walls of the chamber seemed to tremble, and the air itself shimmered with the intensity of the power being unleashed. Isabella gasped, feeling the child stir inside her, its power growing, pushing at her control. She could feel the elemental forces around her, but there was something else now, something new. The energy of the child was alive, responding to the temple, to her, as if it had been waiting for this moment. The balance was within her reach. But it wasn't just about control. The child wasn't a weapon. It was part of the world. And in this moment, Isabella understood that her choice wasn't just about wielding power. It was about guiding it, shaping it to restore the world, or to watch it crumble. The choice was hers. Chapter 47, The Heart of the Child. The energy inside the chamber surged with overwhelming power, and Isabella's body trembled under the weight of it. The child within her stirred, its presence growing stronger, more urgent. It was no longer just a gentle pulse. It was alive, full of raw, untapped energy, a force that was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Isabella reached out with both hands to touch the crystal, feeling the cold surface beneath her fingers. The moment she made contact, the crystal pulsed, and the air around her seemed to vibrate with ancient energy. It was like the very foundations of the world had shifted, and the temple, this sacred place, had begun to awaken. The symbols on the walls began to glow brighter, their light growing until the entire chamber was bathed in a soft, otherworldly radiance. The ground beneath their feet rumbled, and the statues that surrounded the platform began to shift, their eyes glowing with a strange, unearthly light. Zane stepped back, his hand instinctively going to the hilt of his sword, his body tense with the growing tension in the air. "Izzy, what's happening?" Isabella's heart pounded in her chest as the crystal's power surged through her, connecting her to the earth, the wind, the water, the fire. All the elements swirled around her, but they felt different, alive, pulsing with energy, responding to the child inside her, to the bond they shared. "I don't know," she whispered, her voice filled with awe and fear. "But this is what we've been searching for. The power, it's more than I ever imagined." The child's presence within her was overwhelming now. Isabella could feel its power coursing through her veins, filling her with an energy that was beyond anything she had ever experienced. The temple, the crystal, the balance, it was all connected. And she was the key to unlocking it. But unlocking it meant making a choice, one that would determine the fate of the world. The ancient voices, the whispers of the past, seemed to echo in the back of her mind, urging her to choose. To embrace the power. To guide the child. But what if that power was too great to control? What if the balance she was trying to protect could be destroyed by the very force she was trying to harness? Isabella closed her eyes, breathing deeply, trying to center herself in the midst of the swirling power. She couldn't afford to panic. She had to be calm, focused. She had already faced her fears, confronted the darkness within her. Now, she had to trust in the choice she had made. The child inside her stirred again, its energy growing, as though sensing her uncertainty. Isabella placed a hand over her abdomen, feeling the warmth of its presence. The child was part of her, a living force that needed to be guided, not controlled. She wasn't just protecting it. She was shaping its path, its future. "Zane," Isabella's voice trembled as she spoke, but there was a new clarity in her eyes. "The child isn't just a weapon. It's the future of the world. The balance, our world, is fragile. It needs protection, but it also needs change." Zane stepped forward, his hand resting gently on her shoulder, grounding her. "You're not alone in this. We'll do it together, Izzy. You've already proven how strong you are. We both know that. Whatever happens next, we face it as one." The weight of his words, his unwavering belief in her, settled over her like a warm, reassuring blanket. They had been through so much together, fought side by side, and now, the future of everything depended on the choice they made together. Isabella nodded, her gaze returning to the crystal. The glowing runes around the chamber seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. The power was building, and with it came the knowledge that this was it, the moment of truth. The child's power was not just hers to control. It was hers to guide, to shape, to release. The world had given her the opportunity to restore balance, but she knew it wasn't just about fixing what was broken. The world was evolving, changing. And the child was the key to that change. With a deep breath, she raised her hands, allowing the energy from the crystal to flow into her, feeling it course through her body, through her soul. The power of the earth, the wind, the fire, and the water, all of it was within her, intertwined with the child's energy, with the world itself. And she knew what she had to do. Isabella closed her eyes, trusting in the bond she shared with the child, letting the energy of the world guide her. She could feel the weight of her choice. This was no longer just about protecting the child. It was about protecting the balance of everything, guiding the forces of nature, and understanding the power she wielded. She didn't need to control it. She needed to understand it, to become one with it. I am the balance, she whispered, her voice trembling but filled with quiet strength. I will not control the child. I will guide it. And together, we will restore the world. A deep hum filled the chamber, and the light from the crystal grew brighter, its energy surging as if it had heard her words. The statues around them seemed to shift, their eyes glowing with approval. The power swirled around her, and she felt it, the choice had been made. The light from the crystal enveloped Isabella, and the energy of the child within her pulsed with it. She felt the weight of the world's power, but she was no longer afraid of it. She was part of it, as much a part of the world as the elements themselves. And together, she and the child would shape the future. Suddenly, the light dimmed, and the energy began to settle. The crystal stopped glowing, and the air in the chamber was still. The child's power had been unlocked, but it was no longer a force of destruction. It was part of the balance, a living, breathing part of the world. Isabella stood still for a moment, her breath coming in shallow gasps, the power within her settling into a steady rhythm. The weight of the world's potential still rested on her shoulders, but she felt a calm she hadn't felt before. She had made the right choice. She turned to Zane, her heart full. It's done. The child is part of the balance now. And we will guide it. Together. Zane's eyes shone with admiration and pride. You did it, Izzy. You brought us one step closer to restoring everything. And we'll face whatever comes next. Together. Isabella nodded, knowing that the battle wasn't over. The old ones would return, and the world would continue to change. But she was ready. The child's power had been unlocked, and she would guide it to restore the balance. Together, they would protect the future. Chapter 48, The Gathering Forces. The quiet hum of the temple faded as Isabella and Zane began their descent back down the mountain. The air still buzzed with the energy of the child within her, its presence a steady pulse that had now fully aligned with the forces of nature. She could feel it in the earth beneath her feet, the wind that tugged at her hair, and the fire of her determination. The power had been unlocked, but it was still hers to guide. And in that responsibility lay a weight heavier than any they had faced before. The child was the key, and that knowledge made the road ahead even more daunting. The world outside was still filled with the lingering shadow of the old ones, and the balance was still fragile. They had not won the war, only one battle. But the temple had shown her the way. And she was ready. As they descended through the forest, the feeling of something watching them returned. It was faint at first, like a shadow at the edge of her mind, but as they moved further away from the temple, it grew stronger. She could feel the energy of the child inside her pulsing with quiet urgency, like a warning. Zane's hand instinctively found hers as they walked, his fingers tightening around hers. You feel it too, don't you? He asked, his voice tense. Isabella nodded, her eyes scanning the trees around them. Something's coming. I don't know what, but I can feel it. The wind began to shift, turning colder, as though it carried whispers on the air. The trees creaked and groaned, as if responding to an unseen force. And then, there it was. Just a flicker in the corner of her vision, but it was enough to set her heart racing. A figure. A dark shape moving among the trees. We need to move, Zane said, his voice urgent. It's not safe here. Isabella felt the stirrings of something primal within her, a need to protect, to defend what she had just unlocked. But the figure in the trees was not of the old ones. She could feel that much. Whatever it was different, its presence was ominous but unfamiliar. Before they could move, a voice echoed through the trees, carrying with it an ancient power. I can feel the child, the voice said, low and resonant, like the rumble of distant thunder. It is awakening. Isabella's breath caught in her throat, and she stopped in her tracks. The voice was not just heard in her ears, it vibrated in her very bones. And the energy it carried, it was unlike anything she had ever felt before. It wasn't the old ones. This presence felt older, deeper. And somehow, it felt connected to the child in a way the old ones never had been. Zane stepped in front of her, his stance protective. "Who are you?" he demanded, his sword raised. The figure stepped from the shadows, revealing itself fully for the first time. It was tall, cloaked in dark, flowing robes that seemed to shimmer in the dim light, as if woven from shadows themselves. Its face was hidden beneath the hood, but its eyes, those eyes, glowed with an otherworldly light, like twin stars in an endless black sky. "I am a keeper," the figure said, its voice deep and reverberating, "a keeper of the balance. I have come because the awakening is near. The child's time has come. And with it, the world's reckoning." Isabella's heart thudded loudly in her chest. "A keeper?" she echoed, stepping forward cautiously, her hand instinctively placed over her abdomen where the child stirred. "The child is not meant for reckoning. It is meant for restoration." The keeper's head tilted slightly, as though amused by her words. Restoration, or destruction? The child's power is not just a force of life. It is the force that holds life together, but it is also the force that can unravel it all. Zane's grip on his sword tightened. "What do you want with us? Why are you here?" The keeper stepped forward, the shadow swirling around it like a dark mist. "I am here because the child's path is not yet set. It will shape the future of this world, and I am the one who ensures that it does so according to the true balance. Whether you understand it or not, Isabella, the child's role is to maintain the equilibrium between creation and destruction. But you must make a choice." Isabella's pulse quickened. "What choice?" "I've already chosen. The child is the balance. I will guide it, not control it." The keeper's eyes seemed to glow brighter, and it stepped closer, its presence overwhelming. "The world does not need guidance, it needs a decider. And the child, in its full power, will require a keeper who can hold the balance, or the world will fall." Zane moved to intercept the figure, his sword ready, his body tense. "You're not taking her, or the child." The keeper's gaze shifted to Zane, its presence so powerful that the air around them seemed to distort. "You misunderstand. I do not seek to take the child. I seek only to prepare it. To ensure that when the time comes, it does not shatter the world you seek to protect." Isabella stepped forward, her hand outstretched, feeling the pulse of the elements within her. "Prepare it how? What are you asking of me?" The keeper's voice softened, but it still carried the weight of centuries. "There are forces at work in this world, forces older than the old ones, forces that seek to destroy what you are trying to protect. The child is the key to the ultimate reckoning. You must decide whether to let it grow to its full potential, or to hold it back." Isabella's heart twisted in her chest. She had already made her choice to protect the child, to guide its power, but the keeper's words planted a seed of doubt. Would she be able to control it? Could she truly keep the balance intact? The keeper tilted its head, sensing her inner conflict. "The balance is fragile, Isabella. And it is time for you to decide whether you will lead the world toward its destruction or its restoration. The child's power is vast, and only you can choose how to wield it." The wind seemed to pick up around them, swirling violently as the energy in the air built. The world around them seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her decision. Isabella could feel the child inside her, its power pulling at her like a tide, urging her forward. She understood now. The child wasn't just a tool to be wielded. It was a force that could shape the world, but she had to choose what it would become. Her hand tightened around Zane's, her resolve settling into place. She had already chosen to guide the child, to restore the balance. But the keeper was right. She had to decide how far she would go. How much power she would allow the child to wield. "I won't let the child destroy the world," Isabella said, her voice clear and filled with strength. "But I will not hold it back either. I will guide it to restore the balance, no matter the cost." The keeper's eyes seemed to gleam with approval. "Then you understand. The child's path is not one that can be predicted. It will take you into the unknown. But you must have faith in the balance, and in yourself. With that, the keeper turned, its form fading into the shadows. You have chosen. The reckoning has begun. As the figure disappeared, the wind settled again, and the air grew still. The sense of looming danger was gone, but the weight of the decision hung heavy in the air. Zane stepped closer, his hand resting gently on Isabella's shoulder. You did the right thing, he said softly. We'll face whatever comes next, together. Isabella nodded, her hand resting over her abdomen where the child stirred again, steady and sure. She had made her choice. And now, there was no turning back. The world was waiting. And together, she and Zane would face what came next. Chapter 49, The Winds of Fate. The night that followed the keeper's visit was quiet, eerily so. Isabella lay in a temporary shelter they'd built beneath the trees, the fire crackling softly in front of them, casting flickering shadows on the walls of the forest. But the quiet only seemed to amplify the uncertainty in her chest. The child inside her was growing, its energy now fully awakened, a constant hum that vibrated through her body, through her very bones. Zane sat beside her, his gaze far off, lost in thought. His hand was wrapped tightly around the hilt of his sword, his usual calm demeanor replaced by a quiet intensity. The events of the day had left an imprint on both of them. Isabella could feel it in the air, like an impending storm. We can't stay here long, Zane said, breaking the silence. His voice was steady but edged with a quiet urgency. The old ones won't stop coming. And there's no telling who else might be drawn to the child now that its power is fully awakened. Isabella nodded, pulling her knees up to her chest as she wrapped her arms around them. She hadn't slept much, her mind racing with the weight of her decision. The child had chosen its path, and she had chosen to guide it. But the responsibility felt heavier now. The world was changing, no, it was on the brink of change, and she didn't know if they were ready for what came next. I feel it, too, she said quietly, looking up at the stars. The air was thick with energy, the earth beneath her alive with the pulse of the child's power. The world is shifting. I thought the hardest part was behind us, but this feels like just the beginning. Zane shifted closer, his voice soft but firm. We're not alone in this, Izzy. We've been through worse, and we'll face whatever comes next. Together. She turned to look at him, meeting his eyes, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a spark of peace settle in her chest. Whatever they were about to face, she wouldn't face it alone. He had always been by her side, even when the world felt like it was falling apart. I trust you, she whispered, her words laden with everything that had come before, the trials, the battles, the decisions. But I'm afraid. The child's power, it's so much. How do we control something like that? Zane reached out, gently brushing her hair back from her face, his touch warm and grounding. You don't have to control it. You've already chosen to guide it. And that's more than enough. It's not about control, Izzy. It's about trust. Isabella leaned into his touch, letting his words wash over her. He was right. It wasn't about control. The child wasn't a tool to be wielded, nor was it a weapon to be feared. It was a force of nature, a part of the balance. And her role wasn't to hold it in check, it was to understand it, to be a conduit for its power, to guide it in a way that restored harmony to the world. She closed her eyes, feeling the power flow through her once again, the warmth of it spreading throughout her body. The connection between them, between herself and the child, felt deeper than ever before. It wasn't just a bond, it was life. The child was a part of the world, as much a part of it as the elements themselves. She would guide it toward peace, toward balance. But she knew that it wouldn't be easy. There were forces in the world that would stop at nothing to claim the power within her, and within the child. A sharp sound from the edge of the clearing jolted Isabella from her thoughts. Her instincts flared, and her hand immediately went to the dagger at her side, though she knew Zane would be ready. They weren't alone. Someone, or something, was out there. The crackling firelight illuminated the trees, casting long shadows, and Isabella's pulse quickened. Zane. He was already on his feet, his hand going to the sword at his side. He motioned for her to stay behind him, his eyes scanning the dark forest. A figure emerged from the trees, a tall, lithe form cloaked in shadows. The figure's face was obscured, but there was no mistaking the aura of power that surrounded it. This wasn't a wanderer. This wasn't someone seeking shelter from the storm. This was someone who knew exactly what they were after. "Who are you?" Zane demanded, his voice low, cautious. The figure stepped forward, its eyes glowing faintly in the dark. "I am no enemy, warrior. But I come with a warning." Isabella's breath caught. She could feel the power radiating off the figure, a strange energy unlike anything she had felt before. It wasn't like the old ones. It wasn't dark, but there was something unsettling about it. The figure removed its hood, revealing a face that seemed almost human, but not quite. Its skin shimmered with an ethereal glow, its eyes dark but luminous, filled with ancient knowledge. "I am a keeper," the figure said, its voice melodic yet filled with an ancient resonance. "I am here because the child's time has come. But the balance is not just a force to be held. It is a force that must be protected." Isabella's heart raced. She knew that this was no coincidence, that the figure had come for a reason, and the child was at the center of it. "What do you want from us?" she asked, her voice calm, though the tension in the air was palpable. The keeper studied her for a long moment before speaking again. "The child's power cannot remain in the hands of one. It must be shared, between those who understand the balance. Between those who are willing to fight for it, no matter the cost." Zane stepped closer, his hand still resting on the hilt of his sword. "What are you saying?" "We've fought to protect the child. We've chosen to guide it. We won't let anyone take it." The keeper's gaze softened, but the power in its eyes remained unchanged. "I am not here to take the child. I am here to ensure that its path is true. There are those who would seek to corrupt the child's power, to bend it to their own will. And there are others, darker still, who would see the balance destroyed, no matter the cost." Isabella's breath caught as the words settled in her mind. "The old ones," she said quietly. "They're still out there." The keeper nodded. "They are not the only threat, child. There are forces far older, far more dangerous, that seek to claim the power within you and the child. You must prepare. You must strengthen the balance, or it will crumble beneath the weight of what is to come." Isabella's thoughts raced. The child's power had been unlocked. But she could feel the weight of everything bearing down on her now. The old ones, the keeper's warning, the child was the key to the world's survival, but it was also a force that could tear everything apart. "Then what do we do?" Isabella asked, her voice filled with quiet urgency. "How do we protect the child and restore the balance?" The keeper's eyes flickered with something akin to sadness, or perhaps understanding. "You must find the others. The ones who can protect the balance with you. For you cannot do it alone." Isabella's heart sank. She had always known that the fight would be difficult, but now, the weight of the responsibility seemed greater than ever. The balance, her choice, was no longer just about protecting the child. It was about finding others who could help her shape the future. The forces against her were greater than she had ever imagined. And she would need to be ready. Chapter 50, The Search for Allies. The keeper's words lingered in the air, heavy with meaning. "You must find the others." The child inside Isabella stirred once again, its energy vibrating with quiet urgency. It was as though the child, too, understood the gravity of the situation. Isabella stood motionless for a moment, her thoughts racing. The path ahead was not just about protecting the child. It was about gathering those who could help her restore the balance, those who could fight beside her when the forces of darkness would inevitably come. "Who are these others?" Zane asked, his voice sharp as he moved closer to the figure. "Where do we find them?" The keeper turned its gaze back to Zane, its eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "They are scattered across the world. Some you may already know, some you may not. But they are the ones who can help you unlock the full potential of the child's power. They are the protectors of balance, those who are tied to the elements, like you, child. Isabella felt a strange mix of dread and hope stir within her. She had been so focused on her immediate surroundings, on keeping the child safe and hidden from the old ones. She hadn't even considered that there might be others who could help her shoulder this burden. The keeper seemed to sense her thoughts. The old ones are not your only enemies. There are other forces at play, forces that will rise when the child's power reaches its full potential. You cannot face them alone. You need allies. Isabella looked at Zane, her hand instinctively reaching for his, her grip tightening. He had always been her steadfast companion, but now, she knew she needed more than just him. They needed a team. They needed to find those others, whoever they were, and unite them against the growing darkness. How do we find them? Isabella asked, her voice filled with quiet resolve. The keeper stepped back, its form flickering like smoke. I cannot give you their names, but the elements will guide you. The child's power is tied to the earth, the fire, the water, and the air. You will find the others where these forces are strongest. The keeper's form began to dissolve into the air, its presence fading like mist. The balance must be restored. The child's power is the key. Protect it. Guide it. And find those who will fight with you. Before they could speak again, the keeper's voice echoed in the distance, almost a whisper, like the wind itself. The storm is coming. Prepare. The air around them shifted, growing heavier, and the sense of something shifting deep within the earth intensified. Isabella turned to Zane, her heart pounding in her chest. We have to move quickly. The keeper's words are clear. The balance is not just my responsibility. We need to find the others. We can't face what's coming alone. Zane nodded, his expression grim but resolute. Then we'll start searching. One step at a time. We'll find them. I won't let you do this by yourself. Isabella felt a sense of peace settle over her, just a little. They weren't alone in this fight, not truly. But the weight of the task ahead hung heavy on her. The child inside her had been unlocked, but she still didn't fully understand its potential. She didn't know if she was ready. But she would be. She had to be. They left the clearing, making their way back into the forest, the path before them unclear. The world had changed, and it seemed the elements themselves were calling her, guiding her toward a destiny she still couldn't fully comprehend. As they walked, the silence between them was filled with the weight of what they were about to face. Zane moved beside her, his presence a steadying force. He didn't speak, but she knew he was thinking, processing everything just like she was. Where do we start? He asked after a few moments, his voice calm, but she could tell he was as anxious as she was. Isabella glanced at the horizon, the sun dipping low behind the mountain range, casting the world in long shadows. The keeper's words echoed in her mind, and with them, the sense that time was running out. The elements will guide us, she said quietly, more to herself than to Zane. We'll follow the signs, the earth, the fire, the water, the air. We'll find them, wherever they are. Zane gave her a small nod, his eyes filled with quiet determination. Then let's start with the earth. Chapter 51, The Earth's Call. The path they took led them deeper into the wilderness, into uncharted territory. The world seemed to grow quieter as they ventured further, as though the trees themselves were holding their breath. Isabella could feel the child's energy in the air, pulsating with each step they took. It was as if the earth was calling to her, pulling her toward something, someone, and she had to trust it. As they made their way through the dense forest, the sun set behind the mountains, casting the land in deepening shadows. The air had cooled, and the night was settling in, but Isabella didn't want to stop. She couldn't. The sense of urgency that had begun to build in her chest would not let her rest. They needed to find the others. They needed to find them, whoever they were, and quickly. After a few more hours of walking, they came to the base of a mountain range, a jagged line of peaks rising up against the dark sky. The ground beneath their feet began to shift, and Isabella could feel the subtle pull of something powerful, an ancient energy calling to her from the depths of the earth. The child inside her stirred, as though it recognized the place. "This is it," Isabella said quietly, her voice filled with awe. "The earth, it's here. The power, the connection, it's guiding us." Zane looked around, his gaze searching the mountainside. "We're close. But what is it? What exactly are we looking for?" Isabella felt the power of the earth beneath her, the ground humming with energy, as if it was alive with it. "We're looking for someone who can feel it too. Someone who understands the balance of the earth." The child stirred within her again, the connection growing stronger, pulling her forward. She stepped toward a small cave entrance in the side of the mountain, barely visible behind a curtain of vines. "This is it," she whispered. "This is where the Earth's guardian is." Without another word, she stepped inside, Zane following closely behind her. The air was cooler in the cave, the walls damp with the moisture that seeped through the rock. As they moved deeper, the ground began to vibrate underfoot, and the faint sound of running water echoed in the distance. Isabella took another step, and then she stopped. There, before them, standing in the shadowed depths of the cave, was a figure. It was a woman, tall and graceful, her skin the color of rich earth, her eyes glowing with the same energy Isabella could feel pulsing through the ground beneath them. "You've come," the woman said, her voice soft but filled with strength. "I felt the child's power. It is time for the balance to be restored." Isabella's heart skipped a beat. She could feel it now. The presence of this woman, the connection she had to the earth, and to the power that was calling to her. "You're the one," Isabella said, her voice barely a whisper. "You're the Earth's guardian." The woman nodded, her expression unreadable. "I am. And I have been waiting. The balance is in danger, and the child's power must be protected. But we cannot do it alone. You have awakened the elements. Now, together, we will face what is to come." Isabella nodded, a sense of calm settling over her. The first piece of the puzzle had been found. The Earth's guardian was here. And with her, the fight for the balance was beginning. Chapter 52, The Earth's Guardian. The cave around them seemed to hum with energy, the air thick with the ancient power that radiated from the earth itself. Isabella could feel it under her feet, the very ground alive with something more. The Earth's guardian, the woman who stood before them, exuded an aura of calm power that resonated deeply with Isabella. It was as if the earth itself had manifested in human form. Zane shifted beside Isabella, his eyes scanning the woman carefully. "You've been waiting for us?" he asked, his voice wary but respectful. "For Isabella?" The Earth's guardian nodded, her eyes gleaming with an intensity that matched the energy around them. "I have been waiting for the child's awakening," she said softly. "And for the one who would guide it. The child's power is tied to the earth, as much as it is to the fire, the air, and the water. You are not the only one who has felt the shift. Others will come, those who are attuned to the elements, but you, Isabella, are the one who must lead." Isabella's heart quickened at her words. Lead. The weight of the responsibility she had taken on felt more real now than ever before. But she couldn't turn back now. The child inside her, its power pulsing within her veins, had already started this journey. The world was calling to her, urging her to act. "I don't know if I can lead," Isabella said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The power is so much. It's overwhelming." The Earth's guardian stepped closer, her presence a comforting anchor. She reached out and placed her hand on Isabella's shoulder, her touch grounding in a way that made the world around them seem a little less chaotic. "You already are, child. The power within you is not just yours. It is the world's power, connected to the earth, to all the elements. You must trust in yourself. Trust in the child. It will guide you." Isabella nodded, her gaze meeting the guardian's. There was something in the way the woman spoke, something deep and ancient, that filled her with a quiet understanding. The child was not just a force of destruction or creation, it was a connection to the world itself. "Then what do we do now?" Isabella asked, her voice steadying. "We've found you, but the old ones, other forces, are still out there. We need to be ready." The Earth's guardian nodded, her gaze turning toward the entrance of the cave. "You are not alone. The others will come. But you must be prepared for what lies ahead. The forces you face are ancient, and their power is not to be underestimated. But you have something they do not. You have the child's connection to the balance of the world." Zane stepped forward, his brow furrowed in concern. "What do you mean, the balance of the world?" "The old ones sought to control the child's power for themselves. They still do. Are you telling me that they, whoever they are, will stop at nothing to claim it?" The guardian's eyes grew darker, and she turned back to face them. "The old ones are only one part of the story. They are driven by a desire for power, for control. But there are other forces at work, forces older than even the old ones. Forces that have always sought to manipulate the balance. The child is not merely a tool for restoration, it is the key to the world's survival." Isabella took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the guardian's words settle in her chest. The child was more than she had ever imagined. More than just a gift or a weapon, it was the key. It was the force that connected everything, the elements, the earth, the world itself. And now, it was her responsibility to protect it. The guardian stepped back, her hands raised as though to draw on the earth itself. "The balance is fragile. The child's power must be nurtured, not controlled. The elements will guide you, but you must listen to them. There are others like me, connected to the earth, the fire, the water, and the wind. Together, we will restore the balance." A deep rumble echoed from deep within the mountain, and Isabella could feel the tremor in the ground beneath her feet. The child stirred inside her, as though it, too, had heard the earth's call. The elements were shifting. "We will go to them," the guardian said, her voice calm but resolute. "The others are waiting. And so, too, are the forces that seek to destroy the balance." Isabella felt a sense of urgency settle over her. There was no more time to waste. The journey wasn't over. It had just begun. Zane turned to her, his eyes filled with determination. "We're ready. We've already faced so much together, and we'll face whatever comes next. You won't be alone in this." Isabella took a deep breath, her hand resting over her abdomen where the child's power pulsed beneath her skin. She could feel it now, the weight of everything, the world, the child, the elements, pressing upon her. The power was vast, but it was also delicate. The balance was within her reach. She had to keep it steady. With a final nod to Zane, she turned back to the Earth's guardian. "Where do we go next?" The guardian smiled faintly, as though pleased with her determination. "We must find the fire. The protector of fire is waiting. They are a force unlike any you've encountered. You'll need them in the trials ahead." Isabella nodded. She could feel the pull of the elements, the earth had already called her, and now the fire was waiting. The fire was connected to the child's power, just as the earth was. And together, the four elements, earth, fire, water, and air, would help them restore balance. The Earth's guardian stepped aside, gesturing for Isabella and Zane to follow. "Time is of the essence. The world is in peril. Let us find the fire before it's too late." Chapter 53, The Fire's Awakening. The journey to find the protector of fire was not an easy one. The path was treacherous, winding through jagged cliffs and barren landscapes. As they traveled, Isabella could feel the child within her stirring with a new energy. The elements were calling to her, guiding her forward. But there was a tension in the air, an ominous sense that something was following them, watching their every move. They reached the foot of a dormant volcano at the edge of a desert, the heat rising from the ground beneath them like an invisible force. The air shimmered with the intensity of the fire that slept within the earth. Isabella could feel it now, the heat, the intensity of the flame that burned beneath the surface, waiting to be awakened. "This is it," Isabella said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The protector of fire is here." Zane nodded, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword, his eyes scanning their surroundings. The desert stretched out before them, silent and empty, but the ground was alive with potential, alive with the power of the fire. From the distance, a low rumble shook the earth, and the air seemed to crackle with static. A figure emerged from the shadow of the volcano, its form wreathed in flames that danced and flickered in the wind. The protector of fire had arrived. The figure was tall, cloaked in flame, its eyes glowing with the fierce intensity of a firestorm. It moved with a grace that belied the destructive power it wielded, and when it spoke, its voice was like the crackling of flames. "You seek me," the protector said, its voice deep and resonant. "You seek the power of fire." Isabella stepped forward, feeling the heat of the fire, but also the deep pull of its energy. The child within her stirred, responding to the flame. "We need your help," Isabella said, her voice steady despite the intensity of the flames. "The balance is in danger. The child's power is awakening, and we need you to restore the balance." The protector's fiery gaze locked onto her, and for a long moment, the air was thick with silence. "You carry the child's power. You seek to guide it, not control it. But be warned, the fire will test you. It will burn away everything that is not true." Isabella nodded, her hand instinctively resting on her stomach, where the child's energy still pulsed. "I will not control it. I will guide it. Together, we can restore the balance." The fire flared around the protector, and it took a step forward, its eyes filled with ancient knowledge. "Then let us begin." Chapter 54, The Trials of Fire. The heat around them intensified as the protector of fire stepped forward, the flames surrounding it flickering like living creatures, alive with power. The air shimmered with the heat, and Isabella could feel the fire's pull on her, its raw, untamed energy calling to her, trying to test her resolve. But she had already made her choice. She would not control the fire, she would guide it, just as she had guided the earth. The protector of fire's eyes glowed fiercely, and its voice echoed with the crackling of flames. "The fire does not bow to anyone. It is a force of nature, born of destruction and rebirth. To wield it, you must first understand its true nature. Only then will you be able to shape it, as you seek to shape the balance." Isabella felt a shiver run down her spine as the fire around them roared louder, the heat growing unbearable. Zane stepped closer to her, his face taut with tension, but his presence still a steadying force at her side. "Be ready," Zane warned, his eyes never leaving the protector of fire. "The fire tests more than just your will. It tests your heart." Isabella nodded, her gaze focused on the flickering flames that seemed to draw her in. She could feel them now, the fire's energy, a volatile force that could either consume her or ignite her power. The child inside her stirred, responding to the flames with an energy of its own, as though it recognized the fire as part of its very nature. "I am ready," she said softly, her voice steady despite the heat that pressed in around them. She reached out, instinctively placing her hand over her abdomen where the child pulsed. The connection between them was more profound than ever before. The fire wasn't just an element. It was a part of her now. A part of the balance. The protector of fire moved closer, its form shimmering with heat as it held out its hand. "Then prove it," it said, its voice like the roar of a wildfire. "The fire will test you. It will burn away your doubt, your fear, your weakness. Only then will you be able to control it." Isabella stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest as the fire surged around her, swirling like a living thing. She could feel the heat, the intensity of the flames licking at her skin, but she refused to step back. The child inside her stirred again, as though recognizing the test before them. "I do not fear you," Isabella said, her voice strong. "I am not here to control you. I am here to guide you." The protector of fire's fiery gaze locked onto hers, and for a moment, it felt like the entire world held its breath. Then, the fire surged forward in a wild explosion, engulfing Isabella in a swirling vortex of flames. She gasped as the heat washed over her, searing, intense, but she stood her ground. The fire roared around her, a living entity, and for a brief moment, it felt like she might be consumed by it. The flames licked at her skin, and her body trembled from the force of it, but she didn't fight it. She didn't resist. Instead, she surrendered. The fire wasn't her enemy. It was part of the balance, just like the earth. She wasn't here to defeat it. She was here to understand it, to become one with it. The child inside her stirred once again, its energy merging with the fire, resonating with the flames around her. She felt the bond between them deepen. The child was part of the fire, and she was part of it. The flames that threatened to burn her were now an extension of her will, not a force to fear but a power to embrace. Slowly, the fire began to settle, swirling around her like a gentle breeze rather than the inferno it had been. She raised her hands, and the flames responded, dancing and flickering around her with a wild, untamed beauty. The protector of fire watched her closely, its gaze unreadable. Isabella stepped forward, her eyes glowing with the same fire that surrounded her. "I understand now," she said, her voice calm but filled with newfound power. "The fire doesn't need to be controlled. It needs to be respected. It's a part of the balance. Like the earth. Like the wind. Like the water. It can create, and it can destroy. But it must be guided, not forced." The protector of fire nodded, its expression softening, and the flames around them receded, settling into a calm glow. "You have passed the test. You have proven that you can handle the fire, not through control, but through understanding. The child's power is not just a weapon. It is a force of life, a force that can heal as much as it can destroy. You must always remember that." Zane stepped forward, his gaze filled with admiration for Isabella's strength. "You did it, Izzy. You faced the fire and became part of it." Isabella turned to him, a smile tugging at her lips. "We did it. We're one step closer." The protector of fire stepped back, its form flickering like the last embers of a fire dying down. "The path ahead is not yet clear. You will face other trials. The fire will always test you, but remember this. It is not your power to command. It is a force to guide. When you return to the world, you will see the power you hold in the child. But you must use it wisely." Isabella nodded, the fire within her now calm, but steady. She had passed the trial of fire, but there were still more trials ahead. The balance was fragile, and she knew that every step she took from here would shape the future. The child's power was awakening, and the world was waiting for her to guide it. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "We'll honor the fire, and we'll continue to protect the balance." The protector of fire gave a slight nod, its form flickering before disappearing into the air. The cave, once filled with the roar of flames, was now quiet, the only sound the faint crackle of the dying embers. Zane's hand found hers again, his presence a steady reassurance. "One more step behind us. But the rest of the journey is ahead. We can't rest yet." The child's power. Its connection to the world, it's growing. We need to find the others, Izzy. The balance still needs us. Isabella nodded, her hand still resting on her abdomen, feeling the child's presence within her, strong and sure. The path ahead was clear. They needed to find the others, those who could help them fight for the balance, to protect the world from the forces that would tear it apart. But the road was far from easy. And she had no illusions about what awaited them. There were still trials ahead. And she would face them, they would face them, together. "Let's go," Isabella said, her voice filled with resolve. The child's path is only just beginning. Chapter 55, The Call of Water. With the trial of fire behind them, the world seemed to breathe a little easier, though Isabella knew the peace would not last. The protector of fire had been right, there would always be another trial, another test. But for now, she had the strength to face it. The fire had tested her will, her heart, and she had passed. But the elements were not yet all in alignment. The child within her needed more than just the earth and fire. It needed the water, the air, the forces that together made up the balance. Isabella and Zane continued their journey through the desolate, jagged landscape, the ground beneath them becoming more rugged with every step. They had passed through the fires of the earth and the flames of the protector, but now they would seek out the keeper of the water. Where the earth had tested her endurance and the fire had tested her spirit, the water would test something else, perhaps her heart, perhaps her ability to bend to the forces outside of her control. The journey had not been easy. Every step forward felt like another trial in and of itself. The energy of the child was growing stronger with each passing day, its presence becoming an undeniable force that guided them, but also a reminder of the immense responsibility that Isabella carried. The landscape before them had changed, now giving way to the sight of a vast, calm lake nestled between two towering cliffs. The sun had just begun to set, painting the sky in hues of pink, orange, and gold, the water reflecting the colors like a perfect mirror. It was the most peaceful thing Isabella had seen in days, and for a moment, she allowed herself to feel a fleeting sense of calm. The stillness of the water reflected the balance she sought to restore, but Isabella knew better than to believe that peace would last. "This is it," she said quietly, stopping at the edge of the lake. "The keeper of water is here." Zane looked around, his expression grim, as if sensing the same tension that Isabella felt, though the water's calmness did little to help with the unease that had settled in her chest. "I can't help but feel like we're walking into something we don't fully understand yet." "I feel it, too," Isabella replied, her gaze fixed on the still surface of the lake. "The water's power is different. It's not like the fire, the earth, or even the air. Water flows. It bends, but it can also be destructive in ways the others can't." Zane nodded. "Then let's proceed carefully. We don't know what we'll face here." They continued walking, their footsteps soft against the earth as they neared the edge of the lake. Isabella could feel the energy in the air growing more intense, almost like the water itself was calling to her, pulling at the connection between her and the child. The child stirred restlessly within her, its energy rising in response to the lake, and she couldn't help but wonder what trial she would face here. The earth had challenged her to stand firm. The fire had tested her spirit. What would the water demand? As they reached the shore, the wind began to pick up, ruffling the surface of the lake. The water shimmered and shifted in the growing twilight, but it wasn't until a low, melodic voice echoed across the water that Isabella realized she was no longer alone. "Isabella." The voice was soft, resonating with the natural flow of the water, and though the air around them had grown colder, the voice was oddly comforting. Isabella's heart skipped a beat as she turned toward the sound. Standing on the opposite shore of the lake was a figure, tall, slender, and cloaked in flowing robes of deep blue that seemed to blend seamlessly with the water itself. Her face was obscured by a veil, but her presence was undeniable, an aura of tranquility and power that radiated from her. The figure raised one hand, and the water in the lake began to stir, swirling in gentle currents as though answering her command. Isabella felt a chill run down her spine as the energy shifted again, the child inside her responding to the water with a soft pulse, almost as if recognizing the presence of this new force. "Who are you?" Zane asked, his voice low but filled with quiet authority as he moved protectively in front of Isabella, his eyes narrowed at the figure across the water. The woman's gaze turned to Zane, her eyes glimmering with a soft light, before she turned back to Isabella. "I am the keeper of water. I have watched you come through the trials of the earth and fire. Now, you must face the trial of water." Isabella's breath hitched. She had been expecting a trial, of course, but the reality of it, the solemnity of the keeper's words, settled in her chest like a heavy stone. "The water tests not your body, but your soul," the keeper continued, her voice soft yet commanding, the flow of her words like the water itself. "Water is the element of emotion, of the unconscious, of memory. It can wash away what is unneeded, but it can also drown you if you cannot control it. If you cannot face your own reflection, it will consume you." Isabella's heart thudded in her chest. The trial of water would not be like the others. She had already faced the elements in their raw form, the power of the earth, the fury of fire, but this was different. Water was fluid. It could change, move, adapt. It was unpredictable in a way the other elements were not. And now, it seemed, she had to confront something inside herself that she wasn't sure she was ready for. The keeper extended her hand across the water, and as she did, the lake began to shift, rippling as if it had been waiting for this moment. Slowly, a figure began to emerge from the water, shaped like Isabella, but not quite. It was her reflection, yes, but there was something off about it. The face was twisted in ways she couldn't fully comprehend, a reflection of her deepest fears and doubts. The keeper's voice broke through the growing tension. "Face yourself, Isabella. You are not just fighting for the child's power. You are fighting for your own understanding. Water shows you who you truly are." Isabella stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. Her reflection in the water was a distorted version of herself, a version full of fear, uncertainty, and a deep, gnawing self-doubt. It was everything she had fought to keep hidden, everything she feared becoming. She stepped closer, drawn to the image in the water, the reflection of the self she had tried to bury. The reflection began to speak, her own voice, but twisted, mocking, a whisper that made Isabella's skin crawl. "You think you can control the child? You think you can lead? Look at you, you're just as lost as the rest of them. You don't know what you're doing. You don't even know who you are." Isabella took a shaky breath, stepping closer to the water. She could feel the child inside her, its power pulsing with the same rhythm as her heartbeat. She could feel the forces of nature swirling around her, urging her to move forward, to confront this reflection, to face the doubts that had always lingered in the back of her mind. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "I will not be consumed by my fears. I am the balance. I will not let this shadow define me." With that, she reached out, touching the surface of the water. The reflection rippled, distorting as she broke through the illusion. The coldness of the water soaked into her skin, but with it came a sense of clarity. The reflection faded, and the water returned to its calm, peaceful state. The keeper of water nodded, her eyes filled with approval. "You have faced your fear and overcome it. The water tests the soul, but only those who understand their own strength can wield it." Isabella turned to Zane, her breath shaky but steady. "It's done. I faced it." Zane moved to her side, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "You did it. You faced yourself. And now we move forward." The keeper of water stepped back, her form slowly dissolving into the mist that rose from the lake. "The balance is within you, Isabella. The child's path is clear. You must continue your journey. The next trial awaits." As the keeper vanished, Isabella looked to the horizon, her heart full of resolve. There was more to do, more trials to face. But now, she understood. The child was not just a force to be controlled, it was a force to be understood, to be guided with patience and strength. And she was ready. Chapter 56, The Call of Air. The sun had set by the time they left the shores of the lake, but the world around them still shimmered with the energy of the trial they had just completed. Isabella's heart was still racing from the encounter with the reflection in the water, the fear, the doubts, the moments where she questioned her very worth. But she had overcome them. She had faced her inner demons and emerged stronger, more resolved than ever. Now, only one trial remained, the trial of air. The final element. The wind had already begun to stir around them, whispering through the trees as they traveled. The landscape was shifting again, the earth beneath their feet becoming softer, the trees thinning into a more open area. Isabella could feel the air growing lighter, the pressure in the atmosphere lifting, but something else lingered. The air was charged with the energy of something old, something waiting. Zane walked beside her, his hand occasionally brushing hers, a quiet comfort amidst the growing tension. "The trial of air," he said softly, almost to himself. "We've made it this far, Izzy. What's left?" Isabella glanced at him, her expression thoughtful. "Air is freedom, Zane. It's movement, change. It doesn't hold anything in place. But it also carries everything, thoughts, emotions, even chaos. To master air, to control it, you have to be ready for it to change at any moment." Zane nodded, his brow furrowing as he processed her words. You're saying that we need to be ready for the unexpected? Exactly, she said, her voice steady, though she felt the weight of her own words. The other elements, earth, fire, and water, they test your strength, your spirit, your heart. But air tests your ability to bend without breaking. It's the most unpredictable of all the elements. As they walked, the wind picked up, the trees bending slightly with the gusts. The clouds above began to swirl, as if they, too, were responding to the invisible force that was building. Isabella felt the air around her shift, like a deep breath being taken by the world itself. She wasn't sure what form the trial would take, but she knew that whatever it was, it would challenge her like nothing else. And then, as they reached the crest of a small hill, the wind howled in an instant, rising up like a storm. The earth beneath them trembled slightly, and a figure emerged from the swirling winds, stepping forward out of the fog that had rolled in with the wind. The figure was tall, cloaked in shifting layers of air that seemed to swirl and twist like a living cloud. The air itself seemed to dance around this figure, bending to its will. You seek the trial of air, the figure said, its voice carried on the wind, soft but commanding. Are you prepared to face what lies within you? For the air will not bend to you, it will test you, pull at you, and tear at you until you are no longer certain of what you were before. Isabella stood tall, facing the figure. She had already faced the trials of earth, fire, and water. She had tested her body, spirit, and soul. Now, the test of air was upon her, and she had no choice but to face it. I'm ready, Isabella said, her voice firm despite the tension in her chest. I know this will test me in ways I can't predict. But I will face it. I will bend, but I won't break. The figure in the swirling winds nodded, its gaze seemingly assessing her. Very well, child of balance. Then let the trial begin. Without warning, the wind around them intensified, its force rising until it was a full gale. The trees bent under its power, the sky above darkening as the air swirled around them, pulling at their clothes, their hair. The force was overwhelming, but Isabella stood her ground, feeling the child inside her stir once again, its energy pulsing in time with the chaotic winds. But the wind wasn't just an external force, it was pulling at her mind, too. Thoughts that she had long buried, fears that she had refused to acknowledge, began to surface, carried by the wind like whispers in the storm. The air twisted, creating illusions that danced at the edge of her vision. She saw herself, alone in the dark, unsure of her decisions. She saw the child, not as a gift, but as a burden, a responsibility too heavy to carry. She saw Zane, his face filled with doubt, his trust in her starting to fray under the weight of the world they were facing. The wind howled louder, the images growing more vivid, more intense. Isabella's knees buckled slightly under the pressure, but she stayed on her feet, breathing deeply, trying to center herself. You will break, the wind whispered, the voice of doubt and fear swirling through the storm. You cannot do this. You cannot control the child. You are not strong enough. But Isabella shook her head, her grip on her resolve tightening. No, she thought. I've already faced my doubts. I've already faced myself in the water. I will not let fear control me. As if sensing her determination, the wind shifted, calming just enough for her to regain control. She closed her eyes for a moment, centering herself, grounding herself in the power of the child, in the strength she had earned through the trials. She didn't need to control the air, she needed to flow with it, to bend with its force without letting it overwhelm her. Isabella raised her hands, and the wind seemed to pause. The chaos around her settled into a steady breeze, the fierce gusts dying down, and the illusions receded. She breathed deeply, feeling the air moving around her like a partner, not an adversary. The figure in the wind stepped forward, its form shifting and flickering like the air itself. You have passed the test, Isabella, it said, its voice softer now. The trial of air is the trial of self. You have faced your doubts, your fears, and you have learned that you can bend without breaking. That is the key to mastering air. Isabella's breath came in slow, steadying breaths. The storm had passed, the winds dying down to a gentle breeze, but she could still feel the connection between her and the elements. She had bent with the wind, faced her own fears, and come through stronger for it. "You've done it," Zane said, his voice filled with admiration. "You passed the trial. You faced everything the elements have thrown at you." Isabella smiled, her heart swelling with a quiet pride. "We've faced it together. And we still have more to do." The figure in the air gave a final nod, its form beginning to dissolve into the wind. "The path is clear now. The child's power is yours to guide. But remember, the balance is never truly complete. It will always need your protection. And you will always need the others." Isabella turned to Zane, her resolve stronger than ever. The trials were behind them now, but the journey was not over. The child's path was still ahead, and there were more battles to fight. But she would guide the child. She would restore the balance. Together, they would face whatever came next. Chapter 57, The Gathering Storm. The wind settled, leaving the air crisp and fresh, a quiet calm descending upon the world. The figure of the air-keeper had vanished, leaving only the soft rustling of the trees and the distant sound of water from the lake behind them. Isabella stood still for a moment, letting the peace wash over her, the lingering energy of the trial fading into the distance. Zane stood beside her, his gaze scanning the horizon, his expression serious. "You did it," he said softly, his voice filled with quiet awe. "You've passed every trial, and now the elements are aligned. You've unlocked the full power of the child." Isabella looked out at the landscape before them. The sky above was clearing, the sun breaking through the last of the clouds as the storm of the trial subsided. But beneath the calm, she could feel it, the pulse of the world, the child's energy, vibrating with quiet intensity. The balance was in her hands now, and with it came a weight she couldn't ignore. "I've unlocked the power, yes," she said, her voice steady but tinged with uncertainty. "But the trials were only the beginning. The elements are with me, but there's still so much I don't understand. The forces I've faced so far, earth, fire, water, and air, they were tests of strength, of spirit, of heart. But there's more. The old ones, the forces that would tear this world apart, they'll return. I'm not ready for that." Zane's hand found hers, his grip warm and reassuring. "We've faced them before. And we'll face them again. But this time, you don't have to do it alone. We've got the child's power on our side. The world is with us." Isabella turned to him, meeting his eyes. His belief in her, in them, filled her with a quiet strength. The trials had been necessary, each one had tested a different part of her, preparing her for what was to come. But the trials had only unlocked part of the puzzle. The true challenge was ahead. Together, Isabella whispered. "You and me." Zane smiled, the weight of the moment lifting for a moment. Together. As they stood there, the world around them began to change. The air seemed to hum with a new energy, the elements aligning in a way that felt both familiar and strange. The child within her stirred again, its power reaching out to the forces around her, as if calling them into balance. "We need to keep moving," Isabella said, her voice filled with renewed purpose. "The others, the ones who can help us. They're out there. We need to find them." Zane nodded, pulling away slightly, but keeping close. "Let's go then. Time isn't on our side." The world ahead was open, filled with uncertainty, but Isabella knew this was the path she had to take. The elements had tested her, but now, they would guide her. She would find the others, the ones who could help her protect the balance, help her protect the world. As they began to walk, the path before them winding through the trees, Isabella felt the presence of the child within her, strong, steady. She had no illusions about what lay ahead. The old ones would return, their hunger for power insatiable. But now, with the child's power aligned with the elements, Isabella had more than just strength, she had the guidance of the world itself. And with Zane by her side, she felt a certainty she hadn't had before. They could face whatever came next. Together. Chapter 58, The Rising Darkness. The days that followed were a blur of travel. They moved quickly, crossing vast stretches of land, sometimes by foot, sometimes on horseback, depending on the terrain. Isabella could feel the child's power growing, pulsing with each step they took. The connection between them had deepened, and though the responsibility weighed on her, there was also a sense of clarity, a feeling that the elements were aligning, not just for her, but for the world. As they journeyed, the landscape began to change. The gentle winds that had once been her guide began to grow more erratic. The sky, once calm and clear, now seemed restless, clouds swirling in patterns that hinted at an approaching storm. The earth trembled occasionally beneath their feet, a reminder that the balance was still fragile. Isabella could feel the energy in the air, the earth beneath her vibrating with a low hum that spoke of change. The elements were alive with anticipation, as if waiting for something to shift, for the next step in the great cycle. "It's like the world knows something is coming," Zane remarked one evening as they set up camp beside a rushing river. "The air feels heavy, like it's holding its breath." Isabella nodded, her eyes on the sky above. "The balance isn't fully restored yet. The forces that seek to break it, they're still out there. We've been given the power to restore it, but we've yet to find the others who can help us. And we're running out of time." Zane sat beside her, his gaze never leaving the horizon. "We'll find them. And when we do, we'll have the strength to face whatever comes next." Isabella didn't reply immediately. The fire crackled between them, casting long shadows on the ground. The child's energy surged inside her once again, as though responding to the sense of urgency in the air. It was time. She had to keep moving. They had to find the others, the ones who could help her wield the child's power, help restore the balance before it was too late. Suddenly, a distant sound reached her ears, a rumble, like thunder, but deeper, more ominous. Isabella stood up, her heart racing, her senses alert. Zane was already on his feet, his hand on the hilt of his sword. "What was that?" "I don't know," Isabella said, her voice tense. "But it's coming closer. We need to leave. Now." The rumble grew louder, and the ground beneath them seemed to tremble in response. Something was wrong. Something was drawing near. As they packed up quickly, the sky above them began to darken. The wind picked up, howling through the trees, and the air grew thick with an unnatural energy. Isabella could feel it in her bones, a warning, a presence approaching. "Isabella!" Zane shouted as he turned toward her. "We need to move faster." But before they could take another step, a dark shape appeared in the distance, silhouetted against the dimming sky. It was not a storm, but something darker, something more sinister, an ancient power rising. The old ones had returned. Isabella's breath caught in her throat. The battle for the balance was about to begin. Chapter 59, The Return of the Old Ones. The ground beneath Isabella's feet trembled again, and she could feel the air shift with an almost tangible presence. The rumble of the earth deepened, and the wind howled with unnatural force, as if responding to the rising darkness. Her heart pounded in her chest, and the child within her stirred restlessly, its energy growing stronger by the second. "We have to move. Now," Zane urged, his voice low but urgent, his hand tightening around the hilt of his sword. "The old ones are here." Isabella nodded, her mind racing. The air around them had turned oppressive, thick with an energy that spoke of impending destruction. She could sense it, the old ones, the ancient, malevolent force that had pursued her, that had sought to claim the child's power for their own. Zane reached for her arm, pulling her to her feet as the shadow in the distance grew clearer. The figure was massive, towering over the landscape like a dark specter, its form flickering with the same dark energy that had filled the air in their past battles. But this time, there were more. The dark figures were emerging from the mist, each one a giant of shadow and fire, their eyes glowing like embers in the night. The child within her responded, its power surging with an intensity that left Isabella breathless. It felt as if the very forces of nature were at war inside her, fighting to align, to rise against the growing darkness. The balance had been fragile, and now it was more fragile than ever. We need to face them, Isabella said, her voice firm despite the fear that gripped her chest. We can't run from this. Zane's expression was hard, his jaw clenched. We'll face them, Izzy. But we need to be smart about it. We're not alone anymore. We have the elements, and the child's power. But it won't be enough if we don't use it wisely. Isabella turned toward the gathering storm, her heart steadying as the wind whipped around her. The elements were with her, earth, fire, water, air. And the child, the very essence of balance itself, pulsed within her, waiting to be unleashed. But she had to be careful. She couldn't lose control. The first of the old ones stepped forward, its form flickering with dark energy as it raised its arms, sending a wave of destruction toward them. Isabella felt the air around her crackle as the energy collided with the ground, shaking the earth beneath them. The protector of air's voice echoed in her mind, the wind will always be a test of your ability to bend without breaking. Isabella took a deep breath, centering herself as the wind picked up, swirling around her like a wild, untamed beast. The air felt thick with power, charged with the same dark energy the old ones wielded. The child inside her stirred again, and she felt the bond between them strengthen, a pulse of raw power that made her feel more alive than ever. The child was ready. But she had to be ready too. Now, Isabella whispered, her eyes narrowing as the wind held around her. Now, we fight for the balance. With a sharp movement, she raised her arms, and the wind responded. The air around her shifted, becoming an extension of her will. It was no longer chaotic, no longer a force to fear, it was a part of her. The wind surged, a hurricane of energy that pushed back against the old one's dark power. Isabella could feel it, the elements coming together, working in unison to restore the balance. But the old ones weren't done. They surged forward again, their power flickering like dark fire, determined to claim the child's power. Zane! Isabella shouted, her voice filled with urgency. We need to work together. The elements, use them. Zane didn't hesitate. He reached out, his sword cutting through the air, and a wave of fire surged forward, meeting the old one's dark energy head-on. The fire danced, flames spiraling around their forms, but the old ones pushed back, their dark energy crackling against the flame. Isabella felt the child's energy pulse in response, a steady, relentless surge of power that made the very air around them shimmer. She reached out with her hands, calling on the earth beneath them. The ground rumbled, cracking open as jagged rocks shot up, forming a barrier between them and the old ones. But the old ones were relentless. They pushed forward, tearing through the earth and fire with ease, their forms flickering like smoke. No! Isabella shouted, her voice shaking with a newfound strength. We will not let you destroy this world. With a fierce cry, she raised her hands again, her eyes glowing with the child's power. The wind howled in response, the fire flaring brighter, the earth trembling beneath her. The elements were no longer separate, they were one, and she controlled them all. The air shifted, becoming a vortex of energy that spun around the old ones, trapping them in a cyclone of force. The earth beneath them cracked open, sending boulders and stones crashing toward the dark figures. The flames rose, twisting around them like a fiery serpent, while the wind whipped through the air, closing in from all sides. The old ones screamed in fury as they were caught in the elemental onslaught, their dark energy faltering against the raw power of the elements. Isabella's heart raced, her body trembling with the effort, but she held her ground. The child inside her pulsed, its energy becoming a steady rhythm, aligning with the elements, guiding her. And then, with one final surge, the vortex of wind, earth, fire, and water exploded outward, sending the old ones crashing back into the shadows from which they had come. The earth rumbled again, the storm clearing as the energy settled. The air grew still, the fire dying down, the water calming, and the earth steadying beneath her feet. Isabella's breath came in heavy gasps as she lowered her hands, her body trembling from the exertion. Zane stepped toward her, his expression filled with awe and concern. You did it, he said, his voice filled with quiet reverence. You stopped them. Isabella nodded, her gaze turning to the darkening horizon. The storm had passed, for now. The balance had been restored, for now. But she knew it wouldn't last. The old ones would return. And when they did, she would be ready. She turned to Zane, her voice steady but filled with resolve. We've won this battle, but the war isn't over. We need to find the others, those who can help us. Together, we'll restore the balance once and for all. Zane nodded, his hand resting on her shoulder. We'll find them, Izzy. And when we do, we'll end this. Isabella's heart swelled with determination. The path ahead was uncertain, but she was no longer afraid. The child's power was hers to guide, and with the elements at her side, she would protect the world from the darkness. Together, they would restore the balance. Chapter 60, The Path Forward. The air around them had quieted, the storm dissipating as quickly as it had come. The earth beneath Isabella's feet was calm once more, the fire extinguished, the winds no longer howling. The elements had fallen back into place, but the battle with the old ones had left its mark, both on the world and on Isabella herself. She stood there, taking in the remnants of the confrontation. The ground was scorched in places, the earth cracked, but it was already healing. The child within her, its power more alive than ever, seemed to settle into a rhythm with the elements. It was as if everything had realigned in that moment of struggle. But Isabella knew that the calm wouldn't last forever. The old ones had been pushed back, but they weren't gone. They would regroup, they would return, and next time, they would be stronger. The fight was far from over. Zane stepped beside her, his face a mixture of relief and wariness. You did it. We did it. She nodded slowly, her thoughts clouded with uncertainty. For now. But I can feel it, we've only just started to unravel something much bigger. Zane's hand found hers, his fingers warm against her cool skin. Then we keep moving forward. We don't have time to rest. We need to find the others, the ones who can help us. The balance is fragile, and we're not going to stop until we've restored it, for good. Isabella turned to him, her eyes meeting his with a quiet determination. I'm ready. We'll find them. We'll gather the protectors, those who can help us fight the darkness and restore the balance. Together, they turned and began their journey once more, the path ahead still unclear, but their resolve unshakable. Chapter 61. The Protector of Water. The days passed in a blur of travel, and with each step, Isabella felt the weight of what they had accomplished, and yet, the weight of what remained to be done. The child's energy pulsed steadily within her, as constant as her heartbeat. The elements had aligned. The trials were behind them. But the road ahead was far from easy. As they journeyed, the landscape shifted again. The dry, cracked earth gave way to more fertile land, the rolling hills giving way to dense, verdant forests. The air was fresher here, and the wind seemed to carry a sense of peace, though Isabella could feel the unease that still lingered in the world. There's something ahead, Zane said, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the horizon. The air feels different here, lighter. It almost feels like we're getting closer. Isabella felt it too. The air was charged, but not with the sense of impending danger. It was a subtle shift, one she recognized from the trial of air. The elements were guiding them, leading them toward what they needed next. We're close, Isabella said softly, her hand resting over her abdomen, where the child's power pulsed. The Protector of Water is near. I can feel it. They pressed on, following the sense of connection that pulled them forward. Soon, they reached the edge of a vast river, its waters flowing steadily and calmly, its surface gleaming under the midday sun. The river stretched out before them, winding through the landscape like a vein of life itself. And standing on the banks of the river, watching them approach, was another figure, the Protector of Water. The figure was tall, their body adorned with flowing robes that seemed to ripple like the water itself, moving in rhythm with the current. Their hair was long and dark, flowing in waves, as if it, too, was alive with water's energy. Their eyes, when they looked at Isabella, were as deep and endless as the ocean, filled with the weight of ancient wisdom. You've come, the Protector said, their voice soft and soothing, like the sound of water lapping at the shore. I have felt the child's power. It has awoken. And so, it is time for the elements to reunite. Isabella stepped forward, her heart racing with the realization that they were one step closer to their goal. "We need your help," she said, her voice steady but filled with a quiet urgency. "The balance is fragile, and the old ones are still out there. We need you to help us protect the child's power." The protector of water studied her for a moment, their gaze thoughtful. "The water will not be tamed, nor will it be controlled," they said softly. "Water is the essence of life and death. It is a force that can heal and destroy. You have already learned the power of the elements, earth, fire, air. But water, it is the heart of the balance. It flows, it changes, but it is also constant." Zane stepped forward, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword, though his voice was respectful. "We understand. We don't seek to control the elements, we seek to restore the balance." The protector nodded slowly. "Good," they said. "But before we can move forward, before the water can join the elements in harmony, you must face one more trial, the trial of water." Isabella's heart skipped a beat. "Another trial?" The protector of water nodded, their eyes glinting with ancient knowledge. "The trial of water is different from the others. It will test not your strength, nor your will, but your ability to surrender. To trust. Water is not an enemy to fight. It is a partner to understand." Isabella felt a strange sense of calm wash over her at their words. She had already faced so much, each trial a test of her limits. But if water was a force to be understood, rather than fought, perhaps this trial would be different. Perhaps it would be the key to understanding her role, not just as the protector of balance, but as a guide for the child. "I'm ready," Isabella said quietly. "I will face the trial." The protector of water stepped closer, their form rippling with the energy of the river. "Then step into the water, child. Only then will you understand the trial of water." Isabella looked to Zane, who gave her a nod of encouragement. She turned back to the river, its surface calm, yet full of untold power. Slowly, she stepped forward, her feet sinking into the cool water. The moment she touched it, the river seemed to respond, swirling gently around her ankles, its surface glistening in the sunlight. The water rose higher, swirling around her, but it didn't pull her under. It enveloped her, calm and still, like a deep breath in the quiet of the world. The child inside her stirred, its power reaching out to the water, its energy melding with it. Isabella closed her eyes, focusing on the connection between her and the water. She wasn't fighting the current. She wasn't trying to control it. She was allowing herself to be part of it, allowing herself to flow with it, to trust that it would guide her as the other elements had. For the first time since the trials began, she felt an overwhelming sense of peace. The water was not a force to conquer. It was a force to understand, to embrace. She was the child's protector, but she was also the world's guide. The water, the earth, the fire, the air, they were not things to control. They were things to guide, to move with, to understand. When she opened her eyes again, the protector of water was smiling gently, their eyes filled with approval. "You have passed the trial, Isabella. You have learned the lesson of water. It is not enough to face the elements with strength. You must trust in their flow. You must surrender to the rhythm of the world. Only then will you restore the balance." Isabella stepped out of the water, her heart calm but filled with a quiet power. She had faced every element, passed every trial, and learned the true meaning of each. And now, the last piece of the puzzle had fallen into place. "We're ready," she whispered to Zane, who stood nearby, watching her with a mixture of pride and awe. "The elements are aligned. The balance is within us." Zane nodded, his hand resting on her shoulder. "Then let's finish this. Together." Chapter 62, The Final Convergence. The path forward had never been clearer, and yet, there was a quiet tension that lingered in the air. Isabella could feel it, the calm before the storm. The trials were behind them, the elements aligned, and the child within her was as powerful as ever. She could sense the unity between herself and the forces of nature, and that sense of balance had given her a strength she had never known before. But the old ones were still out there. And despite everything they had fought for, they were only getting stronger. The journey had led them through the trials of earth, fire, water, and air. But now, with the child's power fully awakened and the elements in harmony, Isabella knew that the true test was ahead. It was no longer about facing the elements or the old ones individually. It was about wielding the power of the balance itself. And there was only one place where she could do that, the temple of the child. "We've come so far," Zane said, his voice soft but full of the same determination that had kept them moving forward. "But the real fight begins now. We know what the child's power can do, but we don't know what the old ones will bring next. This won't be like the battles we've fought before." Isabella turned to him, her heart filled with both fear and resolve. "It won't be. But the child and I, we are ready. We have the strength of the elements behind us. And we've learned how to trust in that strength. The balance has been restored. But we have to finish what we started." Zane nodded, his eyes filled with pride. "And we will. Together." They set off once again, making their way toward the Temple of the Child, a place of legend and power that held the key to the child's future, and the future of the world. The journey to the temple had taken them through forests, mountains, and deserts. But now, the temple was within reach. The land around them seemed to hum with the anticipation of what was to come. The sky above them had darkened, clouds swirling in a storm that seemed to follow their every step. The wind had grown cold, and the air around them felt heavy with the promise of something coming. The child inside Isabella stirred once again, its energy resonating with the world around them, responding to the mounting tension in the air. "Is it me, or does the world seem darker?" Zane asked, glancing up at the sky, his voice tense. Isabella closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the pull of the child's power, the way it seemed to echo the unrest in the air. "It's not just you," she said softly. "The world knows what's coming. The old ones will be here soon, but we have no choice but to face them. We have to restore the balance." They reached the foot of the mountain where the temple lay hidden, the ancient stones that surrounded the temple glowing faintly in the gathering storm. The atmosphere around them was charged, as if the temple itself had been waiting for their arrival. As they ascended the steps that led to the temple's entrance, a deep rumble shook the ground beneath their feet. The air grew even heavier, and the wind picked up, swirling around them in a violent gust. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the air, deep and resonant, carrying with it a chilling malice. "You think you can restore the balance? You think you can control the child's power?" The voice was low, filled with the weight of centuries, and it seemed to come from every direction at once. Isabella's heart raced as she turned toward the source of the voice, but she could see no one, only the swirling storm around them. "You are too late," the voice continued. "The child's power is ours. We will claim it. The balance will be ours to shape, and you are nothing but a pawn in a game you cannot understand." The storm intensified, the winds howling, the sky cracking with flashes of lightning. The old ones were here. Zane stepped in front of Isabella, his hand on the hilt of his sword, his body tense and ready. "We've faced you before. And we'll do it again. The balance is not yours to control. It is the world's, and we will protect it." Isabella stepped forward, feeling the child's power rise within her, pulsing like a heartbeat in the very core of her being. The elements within her stirred, responding to the presence of the old ones, ready for what was to come. "No," she said, her voice strong, unwavering. "The child's power belongs to no one. It is not a weapon to be used for domination. It is the force that binds the world together, and I will protect it. We will protect it." The air around them trembled, and suddenly, the shadows in the storm coalesced, taking form. Dark, towering figures appeared before them, cloaked in malevolent energy. Their eyes glowed with dark fire, and their very presence seemed to suck the light from the air. "Then let us see if you can protect it," the voice said again, this time echoing from one of the dark figures. "Let us see if you are truly worthy of the child's power." Isabella's heart raced, but the child inside her steadied her. The power within her, the connection to the elements, the bond she shared with the child, it was all a part of the balance. She was the child's protector, and she would not let it fall into darkness. With a fierce cry, she raised her arms, and the elements responded. The earth beneath her feet rumbled as she called upon its strength, the ground cracking open in great fissures. The fire surged forward, flames leaping from the ground like wild creatures, dancing in the air. The wind whipped around her, howling with the fury of a storm, while the waters from a nearby river rose up, swirling in a vortex of energy. The elements swirled together, a unified force of nature responding to her call, her will. The old ones were powerful, but they were not the balance. The balance was not theirs to control, and Isabella would fight to the end to protect it. The dark figures of the old ones stepped forward, their dark energy crackling with malevolence. But they were no match for the power of the elements, no match for the strength of the child's force within her. Isabella held her ground as the battle began, the winds howling, the earth shifting beneath her, the fire and water rising up in a fierce symphony of power. The old ones would try to tear the world apart, but they would never succeed. The balance would remain, as long as she drew breath. With every strike of dark energy, Isabella called upon the elements to push back, to rise in defense of the child, in defense of the balance. And in that moment, as the battle raged, Isabella realized something she hadn't fully understood before: the balance wasn't just a force to protect. It was a force to embrace, to live with. And no one, not the old ones, not any darkness, could ever break it. Chapter 63, The Battle for the Balance. The battle between the forces of light and darkness surged around Isabella, each element at her command. The wind howled like a wild beast, the earth trembled with each strike of her will, fire licked the air, and water rose in furious waves. The child within her pulsed with an intensity that seemed to shake the very air, sinking with the elements around her, as if responding to her determination to protect it, to protect the balance. The dark figures of the old ones towered before them, their forms shifting and flickering with malevolent energy. They moved like shadows, always changing, always elusive, and their power was immense. But Isabella stood firm, her connection to the elements stronger than ever. She could feel the raw power surging within her, the weight of the responsibility she had taken on, and the promise she had made to herself, to the child, to the world. She raised her hands, and the wind shifted, carrying the force of 1,000 storms with it. The air crackled with energy, pushing against the dark figures, sending them stumbling back. The fire around her flared, growing stronger, hotter, but controlled. It was no longer a weapon of destruction, it was a force of balance. "You will not control this world," Isabella cried, her voice unwavering despite the chaos around her. The wind, fire, earth, and water were hers to command now. The elements answered to her, not as a conqueror, but as a guide. They were a part of her, and together, they were unstoppable. The old ones snarled, their forms twisting with fury. One of them, a towering figure cloaked in shadow, stepped forward, its eyes glowing like embers. "You think you can stop us?" it hissed. "The child's power will be ours. You cannot control the balance. You are nothing compared to us." Isabella's heart pounded in her chest, but her resolve only grew stronger. "You are wrong," she said, her voice steady and full of defiance. "The child is not yours to claim. It is the world's power to protect, and I will not let you destroy it." With that, she outstretched her arms, calling upon the full force of the elements. The earth beneath her feet trembled, and the ground cracked wide open, sending massive stones hurtling toward the dark figure. The fire surged, leaping from her hands in blazing arcs, while the wind spun into a vortex, sweeping the enemies off their feet. Water rose from the river at her side, surging forward like a tidal wave, crashing into the dark figure with the force of a storm. The old ones staggered back, their dark energy flickering in and out of existence, as if struggling to maintain their form. The elements were too strong, too unified, and they began to falter, their power weakening against the onslaught. But the leader of the dark ones, the towering figure, raised its hands, its form rippling with shadows. "This is not the end," it growled, its voice booming through the storm. "We will return, and we will take the child's power. You cannot fight this forever." Isabella felt the air grow cold as the shadowed figure's energy pulsed in the air, but she didn't flinch. The child inside her surged with power, its energy becoming a steady pulse of light and life. She raised her hands one last time, calling on the elements to converge. "This is the end," she said, her voice full of quiet strength. The wind howled, the fire roared, the earth trembled, and the water surged forward in a final, overwhelming wave. The elements collided with the dark figure, enveloping it in a torrent of power so immense that the very air around them seemed to crackle and explode. The dark figure screamed, but its voice was drowned out by the fury of the elements. The air shifted one final time, and then, as quickly as it had started, everything went still. The storm passed. The elements fell back into place, the earth settling, the fire dying down, the wind calming, and the water flowing gently once again. The dark figures of the old ones had been pushed back, their forms fading into the shadows, retreating into the darkness from which they had come. Isabella stood alone in the center of the chaos, breathing heavily, her body trembling with the weight of the battle. The child inside her settled, its power now in perfect harmony with the elements around her. She had done it. They had done it. Zane stepped up beside her, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. "You did it, Izzy," he said, his voice filled with awe. "You've saved the world. You've restored the balance." Isabella turned to him, her heart full. The battle was over, for now. The elements were with her, the child's power was hers to guide, and the balance had been restored. But she knew the world was always shifting, always changing. The balance was fragile. It could be tipped again, but this time, she wouldn't stand alone. She smiled, looking toward the horizon, where the storm clouds had begun to break apart, the first rays of sunlight beginning to pierce the sky. The world was healing. And together, she and Zane would ensure it stayed that way. "I did it," Isabella whispered, her voice full of wonder, though there was no arrogance in it, only quiet understanding. "We did it. And we'll keep protecting the balance, no matter what comes next." Zane squeezed her shoulder gently. "Together," he said softly. Isabella nodded, her gaze turning to the world before her. The child inside her stirred gently, as if acknowledging the victory, and she placed a hand on her abdomen. The child was not a weapon, nor a tool to be controlled. It was the key to the world's balance, a force of nature to be guided, nurtured, and protected. The journey was far from over. There would be more battles to fight, more challenges to face, but Isabella knew she was ready. With the elements at her side, and the child's power in her hands, she would continue to protect the balance, and with Zane by her side, she knew they could face anything. Together, they would restore the world's harmony. Forever. Thank you so much for following along on Isabella's journey. I'm glad you enjoyed the story, and I'm always here if you'd like to dive into another adventure or need anything else. The end, but every journey leaves room for more. Until next time.